In the last episode, we heard from Heather Roach, Director of Marketing at Original Footwear Company, and we talked about how brands can leverage SMS for growth. Now, today, get ready. I'm chatting with Latif Hamilton, creative entrepreneur, fractional CMO, and founder of the Growth Operative, and of course, of SpiritHoods, which is the brand we'll be talking about today. Now, SpiritHoods has generated over $50 million in revenue, and a lot of their success comes from a link between product development and SEO, which really helped them rise to the top of search results. And that's exactly what we'll be diving into today. Now, I'm your host, Raphael Paulin-Daigle, and I'm the founder of SplitBase. This is Minds of eCommerce. Now, this episode is brought to you by SplitBase, and at SplitBase, we help leading 8- and 9-figure brands such as Dr. Squatch, Hyperice, and Amica grow through customer-focused conversion optimization programs. We find out exactly where your store is losing money most, and then we help you fix it. The result? Reduced acquisition cost, increased conversions, higher AOV, and of course, more money, which in returns allows you to scale advertising profitably. We've been at it for over a decade and can help you manage conversion optimization from A to Z. So go to splitbase.com today to request a proposal or even to get a free diagnostic, and you'll be able to learn how we can help you get the most out of your marketing spend. All right, Latif, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah, now, as you know, this podcast is all about going deep, right? And dissecting one key growth strategy so our listeners can get the most value right away. And you said something really interesting, which we haven't really touched on the podcast before, which is one of the strategies that really helped you grow was this link between product development and SEO. So can you tell us a bit more about that so we have context?
Yeah, absolutely. I think originally we were sort of, so Spirit is a fashion brand. Let's just start with that. And we do a lot of product development in a variety of categories. So think coats, could be house robes, throws. We do a lot of things. And for a long time we were designing products with our customers in mind, but we were not necessarily designing our products with consumer demand in mind in the same way. And so, I think that there's a lot of tools out there that can help you expand your outreach, and build on your existing foundation and allow you to expand out and design in a way that both serves your audience and also brings in a whole bunch of brand new customers. And I think a lot of times, at least when we're doing things on the consulting side, for example, we notice that brands can kind of miss this link, and a lot of times that stems from marketing being disconnected from your design or development,
Right.
and this is where that communication really needs to take place to elevate, you know what I mean?
So how do you find that link? Like, let's say I'm a brand,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, we have this approach for product development, but we want to make it a bit more data driven. We want to do what you're talking about. How do we approach that?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think is interesting is sometimes we can have an over-reliance on agencies, and agencies can gatekeep sometimes, And so if you're working with the right agency, that's not necessarily an issue. Or if you're working with the right consultancy, it's not necessarily an issue. But when there is gatekeeping or a lack of knowledge, you can be severely inhibited or limited in your processes. And so for us, it looked like essentially, our SEO agency was just not doing a great job. And after a period of time, I realized that I needed to take this into my own hands, and we were spending a reasonable amount of money and not getting nearly the results that I had anticipated or assumed were possible based on our conversations between us and the agency. So I just decided, I'm going to take all these matters into my own hands. And in doing that, as the product developer and lead designer, right, I realized, there was a fundamental disconnect between what they were trying to achieve, which, just as an example, was to get us ranked for the term, faux fur coat. Let's just start with that, or women's faux fur coat, right, or men's faux fur coat. And there was a disconnect in the awareness of what was possible or low hanging fruit for us. What was the long-term play, right? Because depending on how hard it is to get ranked on Google for some of these search terms, of course you've heard long tail keywords and things like that. But and those are easier to rank for than some of the smaller. So long tail keyword is like a black faux fur coat instead of faux fur coat, right? So you're getting longer in your description, men's black faux fur coat. But
Right.
what we discovered was that we were not designing into pockets that we very easily could design into and
Mm.
capture the market share for that particular product, whether it be yellow, like yellow faux fur coat, tons of searches. And when you looked at the demand, so the demand was high, but the amount of products out there was very low. So when you're doing a little research on SEMrush or Ahrefs, these are tools that I think are absolutely necessary for any business owner. It's not super complex. You can watch some videos and get a grasp of it pretty quickly, or work with somebody to get a better understanding of how your SEO is working or what those search terms mean. But there's a simple process of saying, okay, we're already designing coats, for example. Let's lean into yellow, green, purple, because those are the ones that have a high enough search volume that it makes sense for us to go after that in terms of new customer acquisition. They vibe with our brand because we like color
Mm.
anyways. We geared towards designing festival inspired products anyways, so color
Yep.
works for us. So we're meeting some benchmark foundational elements along the way as we're deciding what we're doing in product development, and we're assessing what people are searching for and designing into exactly what people are searching for. And there's something that happens in the SEO world that is interesting, because if you own, I don't want to say own, but if you're producing enough products, if you're creating enough products in one category, so let's say faux fur coat, we have tons of faux fur coats. So you only gain more advantage by producing more products in that same category. And
Mm.
so as you're expanding out, right, rather than, let's say, we jump into making backpacks, right? That's a departure. It would be better for your company to
Mm.
own the entirety or as much of the faux fur coat world as you can before you expand into another product category, at least when you're looking at it through the lens of SEO. So, for us, it was really about understanding how to name our products, right? We used to name them incorrectly based on search.
Mm.
For example, simple things, men's faux fur coat. Men typically don't they don't use an apostrophe when they write men's. The correct way to do that is men's faux fur coat with an
Mm.
apostrophe. But but they don't do that. So when we were designing our product names, we didn't use an apostrophe. On the flip side, women's do. Women use an apostrophe. There's more searches for women's faux fur coat. So we're paying attention to what SEMrush and what these platforms are telling us that is searchable, that is being searched regularly, and is a high enough demand for us to care. And then we design into those products. And that, in a nutshell, is exactly what you're doing. And as long as you already have the product category itself, like we already do faux fur coats, expanding into a highly searched, low supplied product is going to work out. It's going to do wonders for your brand, and it's going to help you garner tons of organic traffic over the long run, and that only elevates the rest of your company. Every single thing you do from there, like let's say once we own faux fur coats, and we're in the top 3 position. Once you have that, when you launch another product line, like the backpacks or the sweatshirts or whatever, you're going to have a much easier time ranking on first page than when you have none of them, when none of your product categories you've done any work to build a foundation in SEO on. So, really that's the link. The product development, designing within that framework of saying what is the
Mm.
consumers looking for, the people that we haven't tapped into. And also usually that blends with your existing customer base. So it's not like a far departure. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Uh, uh, totally. And this is amazing. Like, I think just to kind of recap for our audience as well, right? Like, there are so many ways to apply this. Like, one, there's looking at volume and looking at what are people actually searching for that's related to my
Mm-hmm.
products, right? Based
Mm-hmm.
on volume, you prioritize product development, or you help prioritize product development using
Yes.
that as a quantitative
Yes.
support. Number two
100%.
is also depth, right? Instead of just targeting everything, really try to dominate one category, one long tail keyword, instead of just going in every other direction. And then
Mm-hmm.
finally, I think if we kind of zoom it down, or zoom in, I should say, there's the details, such as like what are precisely people writing, and is our
Yes.
technical architecture of the site, the naming convention, everything fitting with that. I
That
do
is
have a
exactly right.
question. When do you know that it's the right time to move into a different product category? So, for example, you said let's
Hmm.
say you target yellow faux fur coats, right? Um,
Hmm.
when will you decide that you've created enough yellow faux fur coats to, you know,
Sure.
justify moving on to the red category or to
Yeah.
something entirely
Yeah.
different?
Yeah. Well, it depends on a few things. It depends on how much competition is in that. So, for example, yellow faux fur coats versus red faux fur coats. I can tell you right now, there's going to be more competition in a red faux fur coat or a pink
Mm,
faux fur coat. So it sort of depends. I think if you're already making faux fur coats as in our situation, and we already have black, gray, we already have the basics covered no matter what. Sure, there's a lot of competition on the organic search side for that, but that's not
right.
always the concern, right? We're sort of blending these two worlds. What our customer base is going to want, what people coming to the site naturally are going to want, and what we can target for SEO, what we can target as new customer acquisition. So, you're kind of blending between, within that product category of faux fur coats. You're saying, okay, what makes the most sense for us? And blending that with what, in terms of color. Maybe yellow is not going to work. Maybe you're
Mm,
more contemporary and a lavender. But even that, don't name your coat lavender, most likely, because probably no one's searching for lavender faux fur coat. They're searching for, light purple faux fur coat. So you're
mm,
sort of really getting granular with it. And you're also assessing it based on how difficult it is to achieve a first page for that, right? And you can look at these tools and they can pretty much tell you. They say, the search volume is 100,000 a month, but it's impossible to rank for, right? So there's just no point in starting there. You could
mm,
get there, but you don't want to start there. And then when it comes to switching out completely from that category, generally I would say if you're on it doesn't really matter in my experience to be even on the first page of Google. You need to be in the top 5 positions, right? And now with AI, you really have to think about it. It's even worse. You ideally need to be in the top 3 positions without question. And so if you can be in the top 3 position, because AI is basically changing the fabric of how SEO originally was structured and how it benefited people. It still is there. SEO is still very valuable. It's just that there is another main overarching position that AI is holding at the top. And so that
mm.
pushes you down a little bit. And that's something you have to think about now, which you didn't have to just a year and a half ago. So, and then there's a whole other conversation about how to get, featured in AI. And that's another story for another time. But this is still very relevant when it comes to designing your products and understanding, whether or not you can achieve a ranking in the top 3, top 4, and there are other elements that go along with being able to do that. You have to have good foundational SEO with, that is an
Mm.
important part of it. And you don't want to use black hat tactics or things that are aggressively, maybe work short term, but are bad in the long term. But if you're going to switch out from one product category, so for us, we have faux fur coats. And let's say we wanted to launch another category. Well, we want to launch a product category that's going to ideally have the word faux fur in it, as an example. So maybe we're going to do faux fur booties. Maybe we're going to do faux fur, headwear. Maybe we're going to do,
Mm.
and the reason for that is because, again, we already have traction in whatever our dominant product category is. For us, let's call it faux fur coats. We're going to want to use the weight and power
Mm.
that that term already has, that Google's already saying, hey, they are experts in faux fur. And on top of that, our blog content is talking about faux fur. It's talking about the different types. It's talking about good versus bad. It's talking about real fur versus fake fur. So we're really trying to own that category
Right.
across different. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't have 25 different product categories. I mean, we have a lot. We're a fashion brand. So we have booties, we have body suits, we have coats, we have headwear, we have house robes, we have throws, we have faux fur throws, by the way, important because they're faux fur. I don't make just regular
Mm.
throws because we dominate the product, the overarching term of faux fur, right? So even the house robes, we dominate faux fur house robes because we have faux fur on them. Now we don't dominate, the other just standard house robe or luxury house robe. So we're sort of aggregating these together. We're sort of combining them together to help elevate the brand in its entirety across multiple product spectrums. And if you do that right, if like you said, the naming convention, which we touched on earlier, if you're naming your products correctly, if you're thinking about what next product category you want to design, because it's not about, as a designer, we want to design what we want to design. Even if you're a product guy and it's some different industry, let's say it's a cell phone case or something, right? The thing is we want to design and develop what we're inspired and excited to do, but we have to blend that with the operational, logistical, data oriented things that are going on within the company or surrounding the company. So that would mean blending your desire to design something, but does it mesh or match with what is possible for you to garner in terms of new customer
Yeah, in
acquisition,
terms of demand.
right? And that is fundamental to success. And that's where creativity can be a little misguided, when we go too far in the artistic direction without paying attention to the structural elements of marketing. And so that's kind of the trade-off that we have to do. It's a trade-off between what we love and are passionate about creatively and what operationally makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference that I'm seeing between your approach and I think what I more often than not see when it comes to SEO, right, is people are looking at SEO as just simply a traffic acquisition, right, a marketing channel. What I'm hearing here is that it's not just a marketing channel. It's also, what helps you decide what there's demand for. It helps you validate the market.
Yes.
It helps contain
Yes.
creativity, maybe in the way that you said it, right?
Yeah.
And make sure
Yeah. Yeah.
your creativity will actually pay off. So I love
Yes.
how you're
Yeah. Well
using that
said. Well
approach.
said. Yeah. Yeah. You said it exactly right.
I'm curious here if there's are there any mistakes that, people do with this approach? Like, is there an easy
Yeah.
faux pas that people could fall into?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. SEO is a little tricky.
Yeah.
My recommendation is always to try to at the very least consult with somebody who can guide you. And I really believe that you cannot lead something you don't understand. And as entrepreneurs, it's not that we have to master every department, right? But we do need to have fundamentals. We need to understand fundamentally how something works so that we can command it, we can lead it, we can determine, what the next move is. So, I think without question, one easy mistake to point out is reliance on either an agency or some tool or some software, right?
Right.
Generally speaking, when you have some sort of general software that can just go in and make all these changes, well, there's usually problems with that. There's usually a reason that it's inexpensive,
Yeah.
and quick. It's a quick fix, and it just doesn't hold. It just doesn't hold the candle. So I would say over reliance on someone else because you're too inundated or busy to explore some of the fundamentals. And it's really not that hard. You just dedicate. You say, "Hey, I'm going to take 6 months, and I'm going to watch some videos. I'm going to learn." And what I did is I
Yeah.
actually just consulted with SEO agencies,
Yeah.
and I didn't hire them. I did not hire them. What I did is I consulted because when I hired them, I found that there was some gatekeeping going on, and this isn't the case everywhere. There can be some good agencies, but um, I found that they were gatekeeping, and I found that they really didn't understand the link between product development and design and SEO. They were not doing it that way. What they were doing was just blanketing generalizations around what my industry was and what types of keywords we wanted to rank for. They didn't really understand the fundamentals on how to go about doing that. And the approach really starts with product design and development. Because if you don't have enough products, you're not in a particular category, it's unlikely that you're going to be in first position on Google. Google's not rewarding somebody who has one faux fur coat. They're
Right.
rewarding somebody who has 50 faux fur coats. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's the difference. So how are you thinking about your next product launches, et cetera? So there can be some mistakes for sure, but I think the greatest mistake is not diving in and exploring it yourself and looking at your company or talking or consulting with somebody to learn at the very least what it means to have good product development integrated with SEO. And to be honest, you're saying
Right.
you haven't heard a lot of this. I also haven't heard a lot of this. Was my own journey having to, as an operator, be like, look, how do we make this better?
Right.
We're not getting the results. And I
Yeah.
think, taking it into your own hands as an entrepreneur can work out well.
Yeah, and I think this is the type of strategy that don't hear from D2C brands. You know who I hear this from? Affiliate marketers from way back in the days, right?
Yeah.
Those
Okay.
were the
Yeah.
guys that just, had this kind of method for evaluating demand and everything.
Mm,
And it's really interesting to just hear it applied, more to like a modern D2C version of
right.
it. And I think a lot of D2C brands could, benefit from this. So thank you so
Oh,
much for
massively.
sharing this. We've been
Yeah.
talking with Latif Hamilton. Now, Latif, if people want to hear more about you, about SpiritHoods, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, I mean, if you're curious, I do a lot of behind the scenes, kind of behind the curtains on SpiritHoods for fun, really, on Substack. I kind of have been building out, a weekly articles that kind of dive into different ways entrepreneurs can think about their business and using real world examples of challenges that I've been through. And so I think that can be helpful if you're wanting to just read something consistently, if you like the way I'm thinking. Alternatively, if you want to just check out spirithoods.com, you can just take a look at what we do there. And then the growthoperative.com is where I do a lot of consulting. So if you're wanting to reach out and get some information on how to consult, you just go to growthoperative.com and connect with me there.
Amazing. Latif, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.